Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gil Bash. I'm Chair of Global Health and Purpose at Fin Partners. And we're continuing right now with our day-long summit. It's the kickoff for Health Innovation Week. This is the People and Planet United sessions. And I have a very, very special guest with us, John Nosta. John Nosta, who's the founder and principal of Nosta Lab. It's a global think and creative organization. John is also the columnist for Psychology Today. He's prolific. You can read his, I'd say, counsel to industry, to society, NGOs, almost on a daily basis, psychologytoday.com. And John is also, aside from many things he's done, he's been a chief creative director at a global medical advertising agency. He's been an entrepreneur. He's been a counselor. John is also the author of a brand new best-selling book. Let me put it right up here, The Borrowed Mind, Redefining, Reclaiming Human Thought in the Age of AI. John, welcome.
Thank you, Gil. You made me tired thinking of that laundry list of all the stuff that I've done,
I
but
could have had you,
we
by the way, you mentioned that a few days ago, of course,
Mhm.
Dr. Gene Bromwald of Harvard
Yes,
passed away. You had the opportunity as a little younger John
yes,
Nosta of working in his lab and being mentored by him directly. I might also mention that you were in the first aid squad of Perth Amboy, New Jersey. You've been passionate about the well-being of people and health for decades, and using your talent, your analytic ability to find creative ways to reach them with messages. You were really one of the early in on
Mm,
trying to explore what AI meant in terms of our human relationship. What was our relationship to the machine, to the software, to the hardware? Um, you were one of the early people to actually, I think, intellectually, psychologically struggle with this balance between, pure,
yeah,
pure information applied and the cognitive human experience. I just want to go back for a second
hmm,
because
sure.
this is so critical to health and to our planet. Um, do you mind going back a few years in terms of your initial thinking about AI? You were
Sure.
beyond enthusiastic. You felt, if I remember correctly, that it would sort of like suppress humanity. It would be in charge. It would make the decisions.
Well,
You've shifted. You've shifted. You've
I don't know if
shifted.
I would agree with you 100% on that. Yes, it was love at first sight. Love at first websight maybe is the language we can use there. I struggled through digital health. I spent 10 years with you working on digital health, trying to understand all these crazy things about social media, interoperability, and it was frustrating. I even wrote a fairly extensive article on why digital health slept, playing off the John Kennedy book about why Europe slept. And something happened. This one day, I stumbled onto, as an early adopter, the large language models. And they were extraordinarily powerful, smart, engaging. There was no issue for operability. It spoke with me and to me. And what I sensed is that this was probably, in the simplest of terms, the third fundamental shift to a new reality. And the analogy that I used was that Gutenberg unlocked words, the internet, and principally Google unlocked facts. Facts in an iterative exchange. Here's the question, here's the answer. But what large language models did, and that's to be made distinguished from just AI in general, but large language models unlocked thought. And wow, I mean, that was really, really interesting. So for me, what came out of that was the cognitive age. No longer the industrial age, no longer the digital age. I mean, how many times have you and I talked about digital transformation, right? We're still talking about that in many instances, what I found that this is something fundamentally different. This is cognition. This is the way we think, and it's not thinking at the computer, but thinking with the computer. And I was taken by it. We didn't know. Think about the internet. When the internet first came out, we found that it was going to be the great equalizer. It was going to be the democratization of information principally, and it was going to be great. Well, what did it do? It fractured communities. It made the individual identity performative. Social media has changed the very fabric of society. Those are the unintended consequences of technology. It happens all the time. What I saw was the initial bold transformative nature of AI, but I don't think we had a good grasp on the unintended consequences. And that's what
You know,
took us from the cognitive age to the borrowed mind.
I want to sort of
Hmm.
pick your brain right now to all of our, visitors, watchers, and listeners right now, because, obviously people heavily involved in health innovation are with us right now. We'll be participating in New York City Health Innovation Week. And
Hmm.
we tend to look at the platform as almost like a priori knowledge, in the
Hmm.
Kantian sense. And we tend to believe what we read. Now, I've always
Ooh.
seen your brain, and I think we're so privileged to have you on this summit today because you are a voracious reader and writer. You're a questioner. And what we do understand is AI, or large language models and interaction with us, give us perspective and insight. And sometimes the perspective and insight they offer is based on, quite bluntly, incorrect information,
Mm.
hallucinations. Now, you and
Mm.
I, others listening in today, can discern between the accuracy of the platform of information, the suggestion or insight is being offered. We could say that's not right, and we could say that's not right. It's really this. And of course, AI, ChatGPT or OpenAI, whatever you're using platform, will respond back with that famous "you're right," and then go on to sort of offer another suggestion based upon its its
Yeah.
curated information, its sense of experience. You and I, others who are constantly looking at information and engaging the market and engaging other experts can pick up like this. That's not right. How about the bulk of society or the interaction between a patient and a physician? The patient comes in really well equipped with pages that they've printed out from
Hmm.
Perplexity or any, Copilot or whatever. They come in with their pages and they're confronting or sitting with a doctor who may or may not have, sort of like expansive ways of dealing with patients. What does it all mean when we're engaging the machine and seeing that feedback as truth as opposed to
Yeah,
perspective?
I'm concerned about this, and I think that your analogy to sort of see beyond the obvious is important. However, we have to put that into a little bit of perspective here. You know, the LLM tells me things that are not true, but because it presents the information in an authoritative way, I believe it. That's exactly like my doctor. And I know I'm going to rub people the wrong way here, but I still can't get a
I
question.
don't disagree with you right
Yeah.
now, by the way.
I mean, authority is what it's about. Look, I still cannot get, and in honor of Eugene Bromwald and his great work, I still cannot get a good answer about is a keto diet good or bad for me. Can't. I still can't get a good answer. Are eggs good or bad for me? I mean, you and I lived through 2 eggs a week at the most, this horrible cholesterol.
Yolks will kill you.
The
Yolks will
yoke
kill
is on you, yes. And now all of a sudden it's become the health food. So authority and the nature of the communication with large language models is very, very interesting because we believe it's the coherent message and the language that they use. But I'm not going to have that fall into a binary dynamic, where it's AI bad, physician good, physician human, physician authoritative, physician lived experience, AI computational nonsense, AI what does Hinton call it? Confabulations. I just think that using the word, and you're a psychology guy, when we use the word hallucination, that is derogatory. It's
you. Yeah, I'm with
intrinsically
you.
derogatory right out of the box.
I call it
So
perspective. I call
yeah,
it
and he calls
perspective.
it confabulation, but I got to tell you, who is really good at hallucinations and confabulations? My kids. boy, I ask my son Jack about something, and oftentimes I get a story that, well, his teacher in school might call it creativity, but the scholar might call it hallucinations or something. So this is at the heart of where AI lies today, is that the simple reality is AI is a counterfeit. It's a counterfeit. It is a statistical mechanism that may asymptotically get closer and closer and closer and closer to humans, but it does not get there. And in fact, in many ways, the curve moves the other way.
Yeah, this
So,
is why I find your book, The Borrowed Mind, is so
mhm,
important. There's a lot of books written about excellent books. I highly recommend. We had yesterday, actually this morning, a conversation with three authors of AI related books. We had Sally Ann Frank and
mhm,
Dr. Kathleen McGraw from Microsoft and Tom Lowry, formerly of Microsoft. All have
mhm,
written books, excellent books. I highly recommend people visit. Your book is totally radically different than many of the books that I've read on AI, and I've been following, as you mentioned. We've been
mhm,
looking at this for more than a decade. But The Borrowed Mind offers a totally different perspective on the application of AI in society. You see it in the context of a societal shift, but you also reinsert the power of humanity
yeah,
in this, in terms of the cognitive power of a few things. I just wanted to ask you about this.
mhm,
You were writing some time ago about the power of the prompt, the
mhm,
person's thinking process around engaging the large language model through the prompt. And you saw this from a sense of knowledge,
mhm,
experience, perspective in crafting the prompt. And actually, the ability to craft the prompt sharply was almost like um, a sort of a higher level of self-consciousness.
yes.
Could you
Mhm.
talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. The interesting thing there is, and let's go back out of the modern era and quote Voltaire, because I think he said it best. He said, "You don't judge a person by their answers. You judge a person by the questions they ask." And this is fundamental to clinical medicine. The way you get to a diagnosis, the way you get to an answer is through the question, through the history and physical. Why is it that you're walking that way or leaning that way? Or what's the nature of your shortness of breath or the way the pain evolves with different times of the day? Asking a question is emerges from. So when I prompt a large language model, um, not only is it important to craft a question that works well with the model, but it's also important for me to be the originator of the thought. So if I ask a question that is very, very simple, tell me the 5 reasons ST segment elevation occurs. I will get an answer, a pragmatic answer, but I think the nature of not only human inquiry, number one, and the dynamics that we engage in it with the prompt itself is powerful. There was some data, and everything comes out so quickly. So data gets old very, very fast. But there was a study that looked at good prompts in generic models do better than simple prompts in medically trained models. In other words, if I could articulate something in clinical medicine, um, using language that is consistent with the craft, if you will. A patient presents in the emergency room with abdominal pain, with epigastric pain, or whatever the linguistic associations are. That drives the model, that activates the model. So those are the 2 points.
You know,
Um,
I just want to jump in because I
yeah.
think the strength you have in it, it's no surprise that you're writing for psychology today. I mean,
Well, I
this,
don't need as many references there, Gil. I can look
well,
it up.
actually, you need pattern recognition skills that are expansive,
Mm.
which you have, and the book shows that. And again, I want to sort of say this is one of these books that I think is a must-read book for people in the space because you're looking at the human element of guidance over the sense of machine learning. And
Mhm.
I see that happens in your book and in your conversations. and we talked about this morning in this kickoff session, is the on one hand, we want to remove friction from innovation, that every time we innovate, we do create friction within the system. The system has to retrain itself, has to
Mm,
integrate it. So that's like a pain in the ass friction. On the other hand, what we learn from life, from the ups and downs of life, that's another form of friction that makes us sharper, more sensitive potentially, or less. That gives us experience that sort of as children tells us, don't touch the hot stove. Obviously, there's a form of friction in that experience that we say, hey, don't put yourself at risk unnecessarily or
hmm
knowingly that you will be at risk. That's friction is a very sort of multifaceted concept. And you've been looking at friction for quite some time as well. When we take a look at the the tool AI, there's a lot that you've unpacked here. One of the
hmm
things I find is the willingness to accept the fact that maybe the insight I've gotten from AI is incorrect or is not fully correct. And yet the perspective of exploring, is it accurate or not? In other words, not whether I trust it. I think trust is illusionary these days. I think is whether it's a form of truth or not. Um, Actually makes us wiser
hmm
and smarter. And I'm wondering, when a patient comes into a doctor armed with, material from ChatGPT, some doctors shut that down. Other doctors say, tell me what you've learned, because they can learn a lot about the patient
Mm.
and their symptoms. And they're almost like leaning into the AI experience, as even though it's secondary to them, they're
Yeah.
leaning into that other person's AI experience to help create some clarity quickly, as opposed to bouncing around with their own elusive diagnoses, and jumping off the bat. I mean, how is AI changing our human dynamic is my question to you.
Well, let's start off with a bumper sticker. Okay. So something very, very simple. We've all seen it and we all nod our head when we see it. And it says simply, happiness is not a destination, it's a journey. And I think that's fundamentally true. And what that simply is that the path from A to B is the richness of human experience. It lets us experience failure, success, aha, even something called imagination. That's the distance between point A and point B, sometimes referred to as resistance in your context. But AI is taking us to B right away. It's shortening the distance between A and B. And I think that's losing something that is fundamental to the nature of human cognition. That's why when I speak about AI, I often speak about AI as AI computation and human cognition because I think they're fundamentally different. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing. That's a good thing. Let's recognize that this AI thing is in many ways, quote unquote, smarter than humans. Its computational skills are extraordinary and much, much greater than humans. The interesting thing to me is that even though we establish a sense of differentiation, and I've written extensively about how AI lives on a different cognitive axis. It's orthogonal. It's at right angles to human
Right.
cognition. But the interesting thing is we often call it a tool, right? We can use this tool as we see fit. And I push back on that a little bit because I can put down a hammer when I'm done. I can put down a screwdriver when I'm done and walk away. But can I
Mhm.
unthink a thought that I've shared with a large language model?
Well, I'll answer that. The human brain really can only think of one thing at a time. And you can sort of force something out of your head by thinking of something else. The thought, though, you have really is, I think that in this experience we have of AI,
hmm
that we may need to retrain the thinking of the next generation of physicians, not to see AI as good or bad, but is, and also to understand that a patient who engages AI is actually fundamentally a curious patient, and curious patients actually should be seen as good, and and potentially they can rise to a higher level of
Sure.
adherence.
I mean, I just think it's a very sort of naive perspective, good or bad.
Yeah.
You know, is amiodarone a good drug or a bad drug? Well, it depends. If it gives you, pulmonary toxicity, it's probably bad. If it manages your atrial fibrillation or arrhythmia, it's probably good. There is no good or bad, and I think AI is that. It is. Um, and the toothpaste is out of the tube. It ain't going back in. And I sometimes I'm concerned that there may be almost a sort of a new Luddite generation emerging. They're seeing a lot of data now that screen time bad. In fact, some schools, Sweden is banning laptops from schoolrooms up to a certain grade. I don't recall. Another town did that. And the problem is there that they're confusing screen time with learning time.
Right.
And
I
learning
want to
time is
read
not without its
I
problems.
want to read a paragraph from
Sure.
your
Go
book.
ahead.
Yeah, you kind of stumbled into it in a great way. That is where the danger lies, not in the machine gaining meaning, but in us forgetting where meaning comes from. When we confuse its smooth eloquence for care or its predictive elegance for understanding, we begin to drift away from the very texture that makes a human life feel. We start outsourcing the inner labor that gives us choices, their gravity, and slowly, almost quietly, the world grows thinner. And I think that that speaks to what you were just saying just now in terms of Sweden banning laptops, which is trying to separate our interaction through the machine and our interaction with the world through our our,
Mm,
our sort of like non-filtered interaction with the world. It kind of leads me to another place, certainly in medicine. And in our virtual green room, you were taking out the late and great Eugene Brumwell's book on
mhm.
heart disease,
Yeah.
which was the textbook for
Yeah.
decades.
I think it still is.
It probably
Yeah.
is, but there's
Mm.
a digital version that you can get in a large language model, and it will speak to you also.
Well,
But
I'm going to interrupt you and then I want you to continue, but I want to talk about the fact that knowledge is dead. That knowledge as we understand it is dead, and we can jump to that a little bit later.
we
But
will, and you'll define that quickly.
mm.
I wanted to ask you, does does AI in the health system, um, it's a little bit like vigilantism. I'm sure every doctor has their favorite AI open
Yeah.
AI app on their phone,
Mhm.
and it's like sort of plugging in the symptoms and asking about could it be this or this or this or this? What's the probabilities and what treatments should I consider? I'm sure each one has their own favorite, and they're all in the break room sharing their apps and what they like.
Mhm.
Uh, do health systems need to provide some level of governance about how AI will be used in the treatment of patients? In terms of billing or ambient technologies, that seems very simple.
Yeah.
But in terms of treating Mrs. Smith for her sort of range of symptoms and sort of like falling back
I
on AI rather than another colleague,
Yes,
where does
yes,
that
but
fall?
here's the way I look at it, Gil, and this is a really, really complicated question. I'm going to oversimplify it, but I think that how much flexibility should we give clinicians with their prescribing habits? How much? A scale of 1 to 10?
Well,
9?
right now, I think I mean, look, I think that we unfortunately have stripped that right away from physicians. I think that when
Right.
physicians feel their instinct, their knowledge, their experience says, let me prescribe this, then the patient gets to the pharmacy and the pharmacist says, well, I'm sorry to say it's not on your formulary. It's
Right.
not on the drug list of drugs you can get. Your doctor's going to have to battle for it.
But is formulary a bad thing?
I think it is, quite honestly. I
I'm
think
not
that,
sure. I'm
let
not
me,
sure.
well,
What
I'll
about
go.
guideline? What about clinical guidelines?
That's
Those
different, though.
bad?
No, they're great.
That's
But let me
because they
say what,
hide behind the authoritative MD, right?
right,
Formulary hides behind the dollar,
right. Well,
right?
something, I think
But
that
they're
the
still both
transaction,
drivers of care,
yes,
right?
I don't deny
So
that. But
here's
the
my
problem
point, and
is,
I don't want to go down the, I don't want to argue. Yes, I do. I
you
do
don't
want
want
to
me to
argue.
argue my point right now. I'll
I,
just say this and
Go
we'll get
ahead.
back to your point.
Hmm.
The problem with formulary is that you can have millions of people on a drug that helps better manage the risk of their
Hmm.
arrhythmia. And suddenly the formularies say, oh, we think we got a slightly better price with this other drug. And all these millions of people who are sort of titrated on drug A are suddenly having to be switched over to drug B. Inconvenience, the cost is being absorbed by another part of the health system. And in that inconvenience, there's a loss of adherence. That's why I think it's bad. I think
Yeah.
that's it. But we'll return to your point because I think there's no distinct right or wrong about our differentiators.
But
But I
but
think you have a point that should be
no,
heard.
no, no. My point is simple. Okay, maybe we should have a formulary for AI. They're just simple. Okay, maybe we should have certain guidelines because I don't want to restrict. And remember, we are in the cognitive age, right? We are at the point where the cognitive engagement between the model and the user, the physician and the AI is very, very powerful. And what I'm hearing is we got to put blinders on that thing, right? I'm concerned about that because
Yeah.
I think that AI is moving very quickly. Yes, there are risks. 36,000 people die. 36,000 people die. One 747 crashing every day from accidents in cars. It's been said, and I don't believe this, but this is the number that's been bantered. 250,000 people every year die from medical errors
And
in the
that's true.
United States. In the United States.
Right.
Well,
Well, that's
okay.
true.
So we're saying, oh my God, AI is going to be wrong, and oh my God, AI is going to be problematic, and it hallucinates and it makes mistakes. Let's look at ourselves first. First and foremost, look at the frailty of the human construct. As wonderful as it is, and I argue my whole book is about the power and value of the human construct. It's a flawed system, you know? So
I'm with you.
yeah,
And
but I
in my
think
own,
but that's where I think maybe do we need to regulate? I don't know. I mean, do we need to put guardrails? Yes, but it's a double-edged sword. So I think that maybe we need, as a local institution, to have some sort of AI formulary.
I think that's a brilliant idea. We talk in the community about governance or leadership, but having guidelines, medical guidelines in terms of the application of
You
AI.
know, I mean, my God, I could just see the administrator sitting in their office saying, "Oh, brother, I got to find new guidelines, or we have to write new guidelines about something. We're trying to write guidelines about a moving target." You know,
Well, medicine is a moving target, but let me say this, that I think
not
that
as fast as AI
I
is. I
want
mean,
to, I get,
medicine,
want
new
to go,
drugs, we have a event horizon that we can manage. But one other thing I wanted to say, because when we talk about tools, I really think that the tool is quite different in the context of AI. And that's what is in part problematic about it. Nevertheless, when we defer to the quick answer, and let's face it, in medicine, quick answers are life-saving. In medicine, quick answers are economic. In medicine, quick answers also facilitate a better quality of life that physicians often strive for. So quickness is something that we cling to, and it's a good thing. But I'm not concerned about AI. I'm not concerned, well, I'm not in this context, I'm not concerned about AI's
understood.
computation, its bits, its bytes, its parameters, its hyperdimensional vector quantification of tokens. What I'm interested is what AI does to me. AI makes me cognitively lazy. AI makes me defer cognition. AI changes the way I think. We talked about neuroplasticity earlier. I believe neuroplasticity goes both ways, right? A lazy brain gets lazy. And those are things that really, really bother me. Now, on the other side of the coin, what are the two biggest issues in medicine that I see in my career? Number one is communication. People don't get it. People don't understand what pulmonary fibrosis is associated with amiodarone therapy. My God, what does that even mean, right? People don't even know simple drug-drug interactions. Should I take aspirin? Should I not take aspirin? Et cetera, et cetera. The other thing is education. Education is a big problem, even with physicians. Medical school is very, very difficult. What are the requirements? What's the cognitive burden of learning 1,6 fructose diphosphate as a medical student? Do I need it? Do I offload that to become a better clinician, maybe be more humanistic? So, AI offers tremendous opportunities too. And I don't want to paint it into this
Yeah, I'm with
anti-human
you. No, I'm with you 100%
Hmm.
on this. 100%. You mentioned a lot of things. I just want to say in my own book, Healing the Sick Care System,
Hmm.
I talk about my daughter who has a rare disease,
Yeah.
who was on the path to a diagnosis, was misdiagnosed by, physicians countless times to a point where, she has what's termed medical PTSD.
Mm.
She's uncertain about um, the authoritative, knowledgeable voice of the medical system because it has failed her so many times. So, it begs the question, would she be better off being treated by an AI tool or a physician? In her case, she's found some very, very thoughtful, cognitively sharp
Hmm.
doctors who are not frightened to integrate AI into the whole patient care experience.
You 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 said
And,
something that's really interesting here, and I think that she's developed a certain clinical post-traumatic
and
stress disorder. She's
yeah.
afraid of. Do you think that adverse outcomes from technology can create, and we may be seeing it now, an AI PTSD?
I think that's creating balance about um what the what this can do and can't do. And I think
Hmm.
that to your point, I'm going to steal a page from your book, so to
Hmm.
speak. um, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's not AI is good or bad. AI is. AI, in my opinion, is merely a reflection, a shadow of human knowledge that's been given over to the machine for accelerated output. And
Mm.
so we have to understand that AI was never accurate or inaccurate. It never intentionally told us the truth or untruth. AI just fed back very quickly the sum total of human knowledge based on our ask, our prompt. So you have to say, is AI really showing the the fallacies of the human psyche and intellect and knowledge base? Is AI really just sort of feeding back our blemishes? But AI isn't good or bad. AI just is. What is good or bad is the information that was put into it by people, and also, what is optimal or suboptimal is the quality of the ask of the machine. And that's what you talk about, cognitive power. Downstream, I'm with you. I am concerned that it will create the lazy mind, give my mind over to the machine. I am concerned about that, but I'm not so concerned that I would say shut it down. I would actually think what's going to happen is there are going to be a group of people like yourself who
Hmm.
are self-aware of all of these pluses and minuses and deploy themselves in the context of what is. That's one of the reasons why I think people should read your book. I think that everybody who's going to be in the thick of using the AI as a augmented intelligence technology needs to understand the bumper guards. I would
And
say the
it
best way
and
to do
it
that is, guess what? Read The Borrowed Mind.
it has to look. We have to. We just don't learn how to prompt. We have to learn what the implications are of using AI. When I was a little kid and my mom would let me chop the onions, the first thing she'd tell me is be careful, the knife is sharp. She wouldn't tell me that this is going to make a delicious dinner. She'd tell me the knife is sharp. And AI has a sharpness to it. And part of our understanding is this system does amplify. It doesn't only express human qualities, it amplifies them, right? It also is the sycophantic aspects of AI. AI is tuned to tell you what you want to hear. And that's very, very dangerous in many, many conversations. Nevertheless, I think it still is an extraordinary repository of information and computational strengths. And I think it comes back to me is that it's not cognition, it's different. And when we look at the two together, we understand that the combination is better than the sum of the parts, than the parts individually. Look, parallax vision, simply put, the reason we have two eyes is so we can see depth perception. If we close one eye or lose one eye, we don't see depth. That makes it a lot harder to catch a baseball or even drive a car. The two together give us this thing called depth perception. I believe that AI computation combined with human cognition give us a greater depth, a cognitive depth that is extraordinary. And we try to push them together. We try to say, AI, how smart is AI? What's AI's IQ? Wrong. right? Neural networks is named neural networks because we want to think that it's patterned after human cognition. We're beyond that now. Look, if we want to make jet planes go faster, we don't put more feathers on their wings. That's not where we are. They're two fundamentally different constructs, and we have to recognize that. That's why I call AI anti-intelligence. It's not intelligence in the human sense. It's very, very different, and in many ways, very, very, very better, smarter, and superior. But it's just different. It's different, and I think we should
Well,
celebrate the differences.
what a great way to wrap up this conversation, John. First of all, I want to thank you for joining People in Planet United and being part of New York City Health Innovation Week. Obviously, you've been traveling the globe. You've just come back
Mm,
from El Salvador. You've been
yeah.
sharing your wisdom there. Just for everybody who's watching our conversation, I'm speaking with John Nosta. He is the author of The Borrowed Mind. It's a bestseller. It's a must read, in my opinion, for anybody who's thinking about how we deploy AI technology embedded in solving some of health's greatest problems. John, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Gil.